Respected chairperson for today's session, and respected panelists, and my dear ladies and gentlemen, I, on behalf of the Naga Scholar Association, take this wonderful opportunity to welcome each and every one of you gathered here. Today we are gathered here for a very important discussion, as we are all aware about what is going on in the country. So we have decided to, organize a national debate on the 13-point roster system. And this afternoon we are extremely privileged to have some of the top activists in the field of academics in this country. So on behalf of the Naga Scholar Association, we would like to say thank you to each and every one of you for accepting our invitation to be here with us.
Thank you.
And the Naga Scholar Association has been regularly organizing several activities on issues which are of high importance for the Nagas in the Northeast and as well as for the nation. And we request each and every one of you to stay connected with us either on WhatsApp, Facebook, or our activities on the YouTube, updates, and join us whenever time permits you. Well, before we start our event, I would like to give a very brief introduction of our panelists and the chairperson. Even though most of you are aware about them, their activities. To start with, let me take the privilege of introducing Dr.Nandita Narian. Actually, she doesn't need an introduction. She is the head of Department of Mathematics in St.Stephen College. She was also the former president of DUTA, Delhi University Teachers Association, as well as the president of Federation of Central University Teachers Association. We are very much aware of her activities. She has contributed immensely for the teaching communities in this country. And we are very thankful to you, ma'am, for accepting our invitation to be with us. And secondly, we have Dr. Rajiv Ray in our midst. And he also doesn't need any introduction. He is, again, presently the president of Delhi University Teachers Association, DUTA, and also the president of FEDCUTA. And he has been very consistently, fighting for the rights of the teaching communities in the country. And he needs a lot of support from us as well, as he has been fighting many important issues, for the nation. We also would like to request, as much as possible, that we should also give our support to him as well. Well, we have Professor D.K. Lobial in our midst. He also doesn't need any introduction. Let me just say a few words about him. He is the head of Department of School of Computer and System Science in Jawaharlal Nehru University. And he is, without any doubt, one of the most established professor in the field of computer science. And he is also well known for his contribution in strengthening teachers' movement in the country. Thank you very much, Professor Lobial sir, for accepting the invitation to be here. And we have none other than Professor Sukumar as the chairperson for today's session. He is also one person who doesn't need an introduction. Well, Professor Sukumar teaches political science in University of Delhi. And he is very well known for his, for his academic contribution in the field of political science. And he is also considered to be the voice of the marginalized communities in India. Thank you very much, sir, for accepting our invitation, to come and chair today's session. Well, as a token of our love and appreciation, we have a small gift to our panelists and chairperson. To start with, we would like to, we request our executives to kindly hand over a small gift to Dr.Nandita Narian. Let's all give her a big hand. Secondly, we have a small gift for Dr. Rajiv Ray. Thank you. Thirdly, we have a small gift for Professor Lobia. And we have a small gift for Professor Sukumar. Thank you for accepting our invitation to be here today. And once again, I would like to extend our thanks to each and every one of you for coming and participating in today's panel discussion. So now I give the rest of the time to our chairperson, Professor Sukumar. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the entire Naga Researchers Association asking us to, where our panel members, we are all actively involved in this ongoing agitation against the 13-point roster system, and how it is really taking over the representation that has been constitutionally guaranteed to certain underprivileged communities. And it's a very serious question which need to be widely debated. Many parts of the country is yet to be get into the debate. Especially when you look into southern part of the country also, for utter surprise of mine, it is not being debated. And also from northeast, there are certain protests that happen, but still we need to take this. It's our responsibility to take this agitation to the entire national level. That's how I think it's a good initiative. I'm very happy that different groups are coming forward to take this issue up and then debate that what are the consequences of this kind of policy that is going to happen on these marginalized groups, especially scheduled caste, scheduled tribe, and OBC communities. Maybe without wasting our time, what we can do is that let our panelists speak, and then maybe I'll come at the end that certain observations and consequences of such kind of exclusion, what it will happen. It is going to really impact on the higher education, especially in broad sense higher education, and also within the universities and colleges, how space is going to be shrinking, for these communities, and who is going to talk about these groups in these universities, who will be representing certain communities who are continuously facing caste and racial kind of discrimination, which are still prevailing in this university system. So now I request Dr. Nandita Narian to share names. I'm just following.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Zutamo. It's really a privilege to be called at your gathering, and I'm sure that we actually have much more to learn from you, rather than just tell you. I'm sure many of you already know a lot about the issues which are currently exercising all of us. So let me just begin by saying that as Professor Sukumar just said, it's a question of representation. You see, when India gained political independence, then our founding fathers who had led the freedom struggle and then were responsible for framing of the constitution were very clear that the freedom that we have, if we really wanted to reach all our people in a country which has had a long history of inequality based on caste hierarchy which was imposed on society, which has a history of exclusion of those who are the original inhabitants of the land, in terms of the tribals who have been kept on the margins, and their land, their culture and everything has been encroached upon. They have not been able to share the fruits of any kind of development or the resources in the rest of the country. In terms of those people who have been lower down in the so-called lower down in the caste hierarchy, because of which they face discriminations and therefore been kept out of the decision-making processes and also out of education, which is all important. So the constitution that was framed keeping these things in mind had a provision for affirmative action to bring in particularly people from the very clearly identified groups of SC and ST, and then the not so well identified groups, which are the other backward classes on social and educational basis, into the educational mainstream so that they could be empowered to actually participate in the process of democracy. That's a fundamental tenet of democracy, that you are able to give to all its citizens that opportunity. Now, although that at that time there was enough understanding of the populations of these groups, and over a time it became refined, and currently in the constitution and since the 50s itself, there was a provision in government educational institutions and government jobs for reservation of posts to the tune of 7.5% for the STs and 15% for the SCs. And much later, after the Mandal Commission was set up and the report came out, repeatedly the report of the Mandal Commission on the socially and educationally backward classes was not implemented by successive governments. A rough understanding of the population at that time, as per the census records available, was that 52% are in the OBC. It may have increased because we've not had a census for a long time. However, there was a 50% ceiling on reservation imposed by the Supreme Court. So keeping that in mind, the percentage of reservation given to the OBCs, and that was implemented for the first time only after Prime Minister V.P. Singh decided to implement the Mandal Commission. The reservation percentage was given 27%, so that the total of all the three groups would not add up to more than 50%, so it was 49.5%. That was the consideration. So although the population clearly was much larger than that, they would not actually get the reservation on the basis of their the representation in terms of their population, but only as much as would then make it just about 50% of reservation, so that the remaining 50% is open to everybody to compete in, including the same groups. That was the unreserved category. So this is what the idea was, and there are a lot of our friends, actually we need to be addressing those who are not coming from these groups, because that is where all the misconceptions are. And it's so deep-rooted, this feeling of entitlement because you have had all the privileges for so many centuries. All of us tend to think, nobody is actually declassed enough to get out of your background and think in a very neutral way. So all the privileges that we have had for so many generations, you tend to start mistaking that for merit. Okay, and how is merit actually compounded? First, all the factors that go into it, that is all the facilities that you may have, the background you come from, how many generations of people in the learning decision-making process have you had, and at the end of it, if you say that the performance in an examination, which by the way is designed and executed, and interviews are held again by the people from that 15% of the population or so, which is already privileged. So the way in which exams are designed, the way in which interviews are held, is inherently there's a bias in it, not keeping in mind the special strengths of so many of our people in our country who bring their grassroots experience with them and who have been marginalized for various reasons, and so there are certain areas of difficulty. So it's like a win-win game. The rules of the game are also designed in such a manner, and then everybody is made to run the same race. I give an analogy to my students that if you have, for centuries, we've had a system by which you've actually been able to cut the legs off of certain part of your population, There are people with no legs, people with one leg, and people who are able-bodied with two legs. And then you say everybody should run the same race, and whoever wins will be the ones to make it. It's completely unfair. Right? So even if you are so what was suggested was that you have different pools. People with no legs run the same race, people with one leg compete against each other, and then people with two legs compete against each other, so that you have a roughly level playing field, which as of now the playing field is not level. Another way that we would explain it to them was that if you want to really calculate your merit, you have to take into account your privilege, your generations of privilege, and whatever performance you're looking at, marks in school or whatever, you have to divide it by the privilege, if you can quantify it. Then you know what your true merit is. A person with a 60% from school may be far more meritorious than a person who has 90%. After getting all the facilities, not having to face any hardship, not having faced any discrimination, getting the facility of tuitions and everything else, and then doing that well, maybe the other person is much more talented if given a chance. So the idea that merit is confined only to a few ethnic pools is inherently racist. So really it's a question of racism here that we are talking about. You might have those arguments from whites in America or males in Saudi Arabia. Women are not meritorious, they don't do well, and you might then need to counter that by saying, okay, then give us a level playing field. So this is the idea that we need to really address the people who are not in this room and the people who don't come to our gatherings, but in their own quiet way they are working towards the policy of exclusion, which their forefathers had practiced, our forefathers had practiced. Second thing is that on the particular issue here, let me give you an example of Delhi University. You see, a lot of times people say, why not affirmative action? Why not first give education and then give it? Why not first give them facilities and then give, a chance in jobs and so on? Well, who will give it first? Who will implement the educational policies? Who will implement the fact that you should not have dropouts from school, which mainly belong to the SC and ST groups? Who will implement it? Because the decision making is in the hands of people who are already privileged. So you have to let the people govern themselves. You have to allow people to take the power that legitimately belongs to them, give the country back to them. Because we are not a colony anymore and we cannot afford to run the country like a colony. Alright, otherwise, instead of having white skins running the colony, we have people with brown skins and mixed. But we are still a colony because we decide everything for the country. And we are just very few. So the time has come to actually decolonize ourselves, decolonize our minds, decolonize our psyche, and allow the people of this country to run this country, to get the education that they have to get as citizens of the country, and the positions in government and decision-making processes. What happened was that in our university, for a long time, even the SC/ST provision was not implemented in teaching posts. So while we had some reservation in students' positions, in admissions and so on, the class was a little diverse, but the faculty was not. And that kind of position, which may have been there in many other universities, led to a kind of communication gap in some cases between the teachers and the students, and you would have cases of students feeling humiliated, feeling discriminated against, feeling not understood, and then perhaps being driven to suicide and very extreme kind of action, like in the case of Rohit Bandula. Even in our university, considered one of the leading universities, till 1996, we did not have any reservation for SC/ST in teaching posts. Every time that we raised it in the academic council, I was a member in 1992 to 96. Even very progressive vice chancellors would say that no, we follow affirmative action, and that affirmative action was stated that 1 in 5 posts is meant for SC/ST. However, in a university of 6,000, 7,000 teachers at that time, we did not even have one from the SC/ST community. It was really shocking. And I know of cases where people were selected in selection committees, by the selection committee, despite all odds, but the governing body refused to give them an appointment letter. Then after waiting for a long time, they would get fed up and go and join the, appear for the IAS or something like that, where at least there was some chance. So in 1996, it was actually post-Mandal Commission, where there was this big debate and there were, people setting themselves on fire in protest against the Mandal Commission. But at the end of it all political parties had to come around to the view that yes, we have to implement it. Nobody could afford to say that we can't implement it. And even in Delhi University, the Vice Chancellor was summoned 4 times by the Parliamentary Standing Committee, and he was told either you quit or you implement it. It was nothing to do with the small left group in the university pushing for it. No, we had a position on it. We had a position on it, and we were, criticized bitterly in the university community. I'm talking about the left group within the university. We were bitterly criticized. We were told to, give up our jobs and give it to some SCST. There was attempt to garland us with shoes and all that. You can't imagine how hostile the atmosphere was. We lost many elections and so on. But the real change came because Parliament forced it on the university, and even after forcing it, the first roster, that first reservation policy that was adopted, the method was the vacancy-based roster, which was a 40-point roster, in which the unit was the department, and the first post was reserved for SC, the 4th post was reserved for ST, then the 9th post was reserved for SC, and so on. Out of 44 vacancies coming up, 9 were reserved, so that you would make up your percentage. And the idea was to start the reservation early, because naturally, if there are people who have been deprived for so long, unfairly, and the first right is there that you get them in. So that was the idea behind the 40-point roster. But within a year of that, and let me tell you, that in Delhi University, ways were found to avoid even that. After passing it, all the colleges that advertised posts in different departments advertised only 1 post. Now, the rule was that if there's only 1 vacancy which is advertised, then that will not be reserved, then it will be put to the vacancy number 2. So even if there were 3 or 4 vacancies, they were not advertised. Only 1 was advertised, so it was unreserved. Second round, when it happened in the next year, they would be forced to fill up the vacant posts with reservation. Suddenly a new system came, which was called the post-based roster, and that was following a Supreme Court judgment in 1995, which was R.K. Sabharwal versus the state of Punjab, in which the bench ruled that reservation will be post-based in the sense that you will take the entire existing cadre into account. That is, on a particular date that the government decides, and the government decided on the date 2/7/97, on which they gave an order. On that date, you see the existing strength of the cadre. The cadre they had defined as those with the same grade and same mode of recruitment. Alright, we misunderstood it at one time, but nobody bothered to implement it correctly at that time. You will see, suppose you have an existing 100 posts, then how many of those were supposed to have been reserved? That would be the shortfall. And then from that day onwards, you implement the policy, and you reserve so many of the vacant posts as per the percentages which are prescribed. So that was for SC/ST at that time. That started in Delhi University in 1997. Well, it started in 1999 with effect from 1997. It was a department-wise roster. The problem with the judgment was the following. I mean, first they said that you wait for all the percentages to be filled up, then you convert it to a post-based roster, which means that once you have your 7.5 and 15 and at that time 27 was not there. Once you have the percentages filled up, then replacement is done by the same person of the same category, so that the percentage is maintained. But one thing that the Supreme Court said at that time was that no category can get more than the entitlement through reservation. Unreserved you can get, but through reservation you are not, at no stage can you cross your percentage that you are entitled to. So what happened as a result of that? When the roster was made, what is a roster? A roster is a simple way of implementing the percentages, because not all posts come out at the same time. I mean, we don't have so many vacancies per year normally. But when they come out one by one, then you at least see that you are making your percentages over a period of time. That is your 15, 7.5 and so on percentages is achieved over a period of time. So the roster is there to ensure that that happens. Now, when the roster was made, the entitlement of, for example, SC for the first post is only 0.15 because it's 15%. That's not a whole number. When the second vacancy is advertised, the entitlement is 2 multiplied by 0.15. That is 0.30, not a whole number. You can't have a fraction of a post. So the first post that is reserved for SC is the 7th post. This is because of that Supreme Court judgment. And the first post that is reserved for ST is the 14th post, because that is when they get a whole number. The problem with this was that when you were implementing it for the departments, our departments are quite small and vacancies did not arise all the time, unlike in government. So by the time you reach the 14th post, you would not reach the 14th post. You would not reach the 14th time that you're filling up the post so easily. And that is why even after, from 1997 till 2013, where the college as a unit came in our university, we hardly had filled up any of the ST vacancies as was prescribed by law and by the constitution. So there's a severe underrepresentation of STs in our university. This is one, and we criticize this post-based roster for this purpose. Now, one of the things that the UGC also saw this happening, and for some time they didn't bother, but in 2006, the Government of India ruled that we have failed to implement reservations properly in universities, and UGC must issue strict guidelines. And for the first time, the UGC ruled, there was section 6C of the guidelines and 885. In both of them, it was said that you cannot use department as a unit, you have to use the whole college or the whole university, because if you use department as a unit, it is an anti-reservation policy. It is actually used to defeat reservation. So it was prohibited. However, universities after universities kept using departments. And finally, when the UGC started deducting grants in 2010, our university was also subject to cut of grant because they were not implementing the college as a unit. For the first time in 2013, the college as a unit, university as a unit was implemented, but not in the way in which the Government of India had asked it to be done. It was done in a very arbitrary manner, in which, I won't go into details, but in which there was manipulation of posts. We were not getting our prescribed percentages, it was just a matter of chance, and there was no backlog given. So the reservation policy was adopted in 1997. But the cut-off date for this new roster was 2013. So all the appointments that were made in between, people who came and retired and so on, all the times that you should have got your reserve post and did not get it, all that was not taken into account, so there was no backlog given. Backlog vacancies, as per the constitutional amendment of 2008, are supposed to be filled up first, then the remaining vacancies you fill up 50% of them on the basis of reservation. 50% ceiling does not apply to backlog. But that was violated in our university, and then many other things that, if you are teaching against a reserve post, they will wait until you retire, and then the entitlement for the SC or ST will come. That means that you might have to wait for 40 years before you fill up your percentages, because people were appointed last in 2010 and they may have another 40 years of service. So there were all these problems, and we in the DUTA fought against that. We went to every constitutional authority, we approached the Parliamentary Standing Committee, who finally agreed with us and said, this is a mess, it's not working, please correct the roster. Meanwhile, we had our major agitations and appointments were not being held, and posts were going to be reduced by 50%, so we had big agitation for that. And the High Court ordered that all the vacant posts should be filled up. So we wanted quickly that this should be done, that the roster should be corrected, but despite our best efforts, it did not get corrected. College rosters were made, and finally we said, okay, at least let's have one round of appointments, because so many people in all categories were suffering because of so many years no recruitment was done. So that is where it stood. After that, the university went through a mammoth exercise of making rosters, doing the screening, and they started having permanent appointments. In 3 university departments and in 1 college, permanent appointments were held. Just after that, almost as if it was by design. What was that Allahabad High Court judgment? It said that you cannot do this reservation, the unit cannot be the college or the university, it has to be a department. They had some logic there which said that, well, people from different departments can't teach in another department, they can only teach in their own department, and what is happening is sometimes all the posts in a department are getting reserved because there is no care taken. And therefore, this method of reservation is wrong, it should be per department. Without realizing, or maybe while realizing that this will completely wipe out our reservation altogether. So this was what was done, and shockingly the government of India did not even file any appeal in the Supreme Court against this Allahabad High Court order. One individual person, I've forgotten, Lalchan or something, he went to the Supreme Court and he lost, because who bothers about individuals anyway. And then the government sat over it, no review petition, and they ordered on 5th of March 2018 that within a month all universities must have department-wise rosters, and that was very shocking for us because we were just starting making permanent appointments. So many of our people would get pushed out. There will be a massive shuffle, even the unreserved category will be shuffled around. Who knows where they would be accommodated. And then we saw immediately after that, at least in 10 universities across the country, central universities, ads suddenly started coming out where they had not been coming out for years. And in all those ads we would find Indira Gandhi Tribal University, calling itself Tribal University. And out of 100 posts or so that were advertised, not even one, 0 ST posts, 0. And in university after university, 0 ST posts, one maybe SC and 1 or 2 OBC, like that it was happening, it was wiping it out. DUTA went to the minister and said, see, this is what is happening. He said, okay, then we'll stop recruitment, we'll file an SLP. And so an SLP was filed in the Supreme Court, nothing happened. And finally, after a long time, suddenly they said that no, we reject the government plea, which was only expected. We had said, appealed, and the government had more or less promised that to meet the constitutional mandate, we will bring an ordinance in Parliament. And that was the perfect case for bringing an ordinance and a bill in Parliament to protect the Constitution, and no party would have disagreed. But they never did it. 6 months passed, and then the Supreme Court judgment came rejecting the government plea. Even after that they didn't bring an ordinance, we were waiting. And suddenly what happens is, overnight, 24 hours, they bring a different ordinance and a bill, and that gets passed. What is that? Non-SC, ST, OBC, within 8 lakhs limit of total income, will get 10% reservation in out of the 50% unreserved. We were absolutely shocked. This is against the Constitution. Economic basis has never been accepted as a basis, because for economic issues there are other poverty alleviation methods. You have proper employment policy, you have a proper education policy, you empower people. It's not a well-defined group. Today you have some people within 8 lakhs and tomorrow it's beyond 8 lakhs. And 8 lakhs is a very high ceiling. So almost 95% of people will come under that. So what are you reserving? It's a big farce. And it is, really something quite atrocious. And then they say that it will be implemented in universities and we will give you, you have 25% more seats to accommodate it, but no financial allocation for that, no teachers, no infrastructure, nothing in the budget, but you will have to still do it, which means complete academic chaos, complete chaos. Already after the OBC reservation came in 2007, we have not got whatever was promised to us at that time. After 2 years of deliberation, they had worked out, you need so much money, you need so many teachers, you need so much infrastructure. Until today, we have not got the promised number of teachers. We are managing. That's why we are not able to offer students the choices that they will be getting in the choice-based credit system and so on. So the quality of our teaching learning process has already suffered a lot. This will just be like a death knell for us. So that is, we need to tell the people who think that, this is not their problem and they will gain from this. Nobody is going to gain anything from this. And in any case, in a democracy, we cannot allow this sort of thing to happen. And I've already said quite a lot, but basic thing is now, Rajiv will also tell you about how the DUTA has kept this issue as number 1 in its agenda. And even though there may be mixed feelings within the DUTA, but we have many, many more people in the teaching community who are from the SC, ST, OBC communities, although large numbers of them are still ad hoc. And that does make a difference to the positions that we take in the DUTA. It makes a big difference. We're able to take a pro-reservation position, and work towards the implementation of this particular demand. So I won't say anything more about this as of now, but only one last thing I just like to point that I normally make to everybody is that one of the reasons that I feel strongly that we have not, education has not really delivered the goods, even when we had proper public funding and so on, is that we have not drawn on the talents of all our country. I was recently at this Dalit Literature Festival, Dalit and Adivasi Literature Festival, the first of its kind held in Tirunelveli. And there were wonderful people coming from all over the country, and they're telling us about the rich cultural traditions, the democratic traditions, particularly among the STs, the pro-women traditions, which are dying out because of the onslaught of the other cultures which are coming. So the kind of rich traditions that you have, the kind of rich cultural experience, the grassroots level experience, which for example in JNU we're able to see because we have the deprivation point system and students coming from different backgrounds. It really enriches our education and actually promotes the real independent and creative thinking that education is supposed to. Otherwise what happens is, when it comes to independent thinking, you will promote independent thinking as long as it does not threaten your class interest. When it starts threatening your class interest, whether it is through the Mandal Commission or any other kind of reservation policy, then your logic does not work, your rationality does not work. You will give all kinds of arguments to justify why you should continue to own 90% or 95% of the country's resources, even if you're just 5 or 10%. So it is really important, if the country wishes to really move forward, that we radically change this into an egalitarian system where we move towards bringing about equality in our society as per the values laid down in our constitution. That I just end here. Thank you so much. Sorry for having taken so much time.
Thank you, Nandita. Sometimes, it is necessary to seriously deliberate on this. So I guess that we have time. It's not that we are in a hurry. So let us have a detailed dialogue on this. So that's why I also did not interrupt you.
If I was not the first speaker, I would have to say less.
Now I request my friend Raji to